Hey y'all, good morning. Good morning, good morning. It's me, Brianka J, and sorry. Y'all know I like my camera positioned a certain way, and it's not that way, but I'm gonna keep going. So, good morning. It's me, Brianka J. Thank you for coming to my little corner of the internet where we talk all things book, all things literature, all things art. And I'm just so happy you joined us. If you've never been here before, make sure you hit that comment, like, subscribe. If you've been here before, I thank you for coming back. Also, be sure to hit them notifications. Make sure you know when I'm putting out a new video. And of course, the more likes, the more comments, the more subscribers, the quicker I come back with more content. And that's what it's all about, right? So you help me, I help you. You pass college, I grow up in the algorithm. I feel good about sharing my love for and passion for literature. So it all kind of works together. Today, though, we're going to talk about W.e.b. Du Bois. He is a big name when it comes to studying African American literature or African American art because he shared his book, The Criteria for Negro Art, and it's also it is so often used as a resource in college classrooms and English programs, especially focalized on African American literature. So first I'm going to tell you a little bit about Du Bois, and then I'm going to share a little bit about from the essay. So if you like what you're hearing so far, stay tuned. Let's get into this. So we got W.e.b. Du Bois here, and he was alive from 1868 to 1963, and he excelled in many disciplines, creative endeavors, from sociology to social commentary, and even poetry. And his life was just so rich and brilliant, and it really stood outside of what we would consider to be the plight of African American during this time. Du Bois was born in Great Barrington in western Massachusetts, which was a very small town with very few African American residents. He was raised by his mother and her relatives, and in his youth, he became a lover of books, and he began to write early. So even before high school was finished, he was already a correspondent on his local newspaper. He then went south to the south of slavery and rebellion and black folk, and he earned his BA at Fisk University in Tennessee back in 1888. He taught, and he was a student in these rural schools during the summer, and then he says that into this world I leapt with enthusiasm. A new loyalty and allegiance replaced my Americanism. Henceforth, I was a Negro. So because of his experience in the South, he was able to look at the racial divide a little more, and then he was able to identify and say, hey, I'm going to rock with them. So he had a different idea about the slavery, the South, being born free, being born in a town with few blacks. He didn't have a full vision, but as he began to go through the South, he was able to look at the race problem in a new light. From there, he went to Harvard University and got his second bachelor's degree in 1890, and he did some graduate work there. In 1891, he got his master's. In 1895, he got his Ph.D., all of this from Harvard. He studied at the University of Berlin from 1892 to 1894, and that's where he began to see the race problem in America. He said the problem of the peoples of Africa and Asia and the political development of Europe as one. He eventually joins the faculty of Atlanta University, and then he begins writing his book. So he writes his first book, The Suppression of the African Slave Trade to the United States of America, 1638 through 1870, and he was a serious and well-trained scholar. By 1900, he had began to project his vision of race relations outward from America's shores, becoming an active in Pan-Africanism, which is meaning like all black people all over the world need to unify no matter what country you're from. And in his major work, The Souls of Black Folk in 1903, he examines the history of slavery and segregation in the United States and also emphasizes more generally the problem of the 20th century. So, in his book, he writes the famous quote, which I always love and I always quote it in my academic journals, is, "One ever feels his two-ness, an American, a Negro, two souls, two thoughts, two unreconciled strivings, two warring ideals, and one dark body, whose dogged strength alone keeps it from being torn asunder." Du Bois was perhaps best known in his time in his opposition to Booker T. Washington, who founded Tuskegee Institute in Alabama and the leading spokesman to the National Scene of the African Studies. He felt like Booker T. Washington was accommodating messages that whites wanted to hear, where Du Bois was far more militant. He was not satisfied with limited economic progress, and he insisted on social and political rights and access to higher education and development of an elite African-American intellectual and professional class. So that was him and Booker T. Washington's big fight. And this kind of promoted both of them throughout history. Du Bois then affirmed that the central duty of African American writers and artists is to advance the cause of the race. At the same time, he insists that they express the truth about African American life. Du Bois's vision is inclusive and challengingly so. He links the cathedral of the famous Greek statue with a village in West Africa and a Negro song or spiritual. But he appears not to recognize the reductive nature of his fiery dismissal. "I do not care a damn for any art that is not used for propaganda." So that is a little bit about Du Bois, and I don't know how much time I'm going to have, but I'm going to share as much as I can share about criteria of Negro art. And I just have a couple page excerpt, so I won't go too far. So many persons have asked for the complete text of a national address delivered by Dr. Du Bois at the Chicago Conference of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People that we are publishing the address here. It says, "I do not doubt, but there are some in this audience who are a little disturbed at the subject of this meeting, and particularly at the subject I have chosen. Such people are thinking something like this. How is it that an organization like this, a group of radicals trying to bring new things into the world, a fighting organization which has come up out of the blood and dust of battle, struggling for the right of black men to be ordinary human beings, how is it that an organization of this kind can turn aside and talk about art? After all, what have we who are slaves and black to do with art?" Or perhaps there are others who feel a certain relief and are saying, "After all, it is rather satisfactory, after all this talk about rights and fighting, to sit and dream of something which leaves a nice taste in the mouth." Let me tell you that neither of these groups is right. The thing we are talking about tonight is part of the great fight we're carrying on, and it represents a forward and upward look, a public pushing onward. You and I have been resting hills. We have been climbing upward. There has been progress, and we can see it day by day, looking back along blood-filled paths. But as you go through the valleys and over the foothills, so long as you are climbing the direction, north, south, east, or west, it is of less importance. But when gradually the vista widens and you begin to see the world at your feet and the far horizon, then it's time to know more precisely whether you're going and what you really want. What do we want? What is the thing we are after? As it was phrased last night, it had a certain truth. We want to be Americans, full-fledged Americans with all the rights of other American citizens. But is that all? Do we simply want to be Americans? Once in a while, through all of us here flashes some clairvoyance, some clear idea of what America really is. We who are dark can see America in a way that white Americans cannot. And seeing our country thus, we are satisfied with its present goals and ideals. In the high school heart where I studied, we learned most of Scott's Lady of the Lake by heart. In afterlife, once it was my privilege to see the lake, it was Sunday. It was quiet. You could glimpse the deer wandering in unbroken forest. You could hear the soft ripple of romance on the waters. Around me fell the cadence of that poetry of my youth. I fell asleep, full of the enchantment of the Scottish border. A new day broke, and it came a sudden rush of excursionists. They were mostly Americans, and they were loud and strident. They poured upon the little pleasure boat, men with their hats a little on one side and drooping cigars in the wet corners of their mouths. Women who shared their conversation with the world. They all tried to get everywhere first. They pushed other people out of the way. They made all sorts of incoherent noises and gestures so that the quiet home folk and the visitors from other lands silently and half wonderingly gave way before them. They struck a note, not evil, but wrong. They carried, perhaps, a sense of strength and accomplishment, but their hearts had no conception of beauty which pervaded this holy place. If you thought tonight should come full-fledged Americans, if your color faded or the color line here in Chicago was miraculously forgotten, suppose, too, you became at the same time rich and powerful, what is it that you would want? What would you immediately seek? Would you buy the most powerful of motor cars in outrageous Cook County? Would you be the most elaborate estate on the North Shore? Would you be a Rotarian or a lion or whatnot of every last degree? Would you wear the most striking clothes, give the richest dinner, and buy the longest press notices? Even as you visualize such ideals, you know in your heart that these are not the things you really want. You realize this sooner than the average white American because, pushed aside, we have been in America, there has come to us not only a certain distaste for the tawdry and flamboyant, but a vision of what the world could be if it were really a beautiful world. If we had the true spirit, if we had the seeing eye, the cunning hand, the feeling heart, if we had, to be sure, not perfect happiness, but plenty of good hard work, the inevitable suffering that always comes with life, sacrifice and waiting, all that. But nevertheless, in a world where men know, where men create, where they realize themselves, where they enjoy life, it is that sort of world we want to create for ourselves, for all America. After all, who shall describe beauty? What is it? I remember tonight 4 beautiful things. The Cathedral of Cologne, a forest in stone, set in light and changing shadow, echoing with sunlight and solemn song, a village of the V's in West Africa, a little thing of mauve and purple quiet, lying content and shining in the sun, a black and velvet and purple room where on a throne rests, in old and yellowing marble, the broken curves of Venus and Milo, a single phrase of music in the southern south, utter melody, haunting and appealing, suddenly arising out of night and eternity beneath the moon. Such is beauty. Its variety is infinite. Its possibilities is endless. In normal life, all may have it, and yet again, the world is full of it. And yet today, the mass of human beings are choked away from it, and all their lives distorted and made ugly. This is not only wrong, it is silly. Who shall right this well-nigh universal failing? Who shall let this world be beautiful? Who shall restore to men the glory of sunsets and the peace of quiet sleep? We black folk may help, for we have within us as a race new stirrings of the beginning of a new appreciation of joy, of a new desire to create, of a new will to be, as though in this morning of group life, we had awakened some sleep that at once dimly mourns the past and dreams a splendid future. And there has come the conviction that the youth that is here today, the Negro youth, is a different kind of youth, because in some new way it bears this mighty prophecy on its breast, with the new realization of itself, with the new determination of all mankind. What has this beauty to do with the world? What has the beauty to do with truth and goodness, with the facts of the world and the right actions of men? Nothing, the artist rushed to answer. They may be right. I am but in humble discipline of art and cannot presume to say. I am one who tells the truth and exposes evil and seeks with beauty and for beauty to set the world right. That somehow, somewhere, eternal and perfect beauty sits above truth and right, I cannot conceive. But here and now, and in the world of which I work, they are from me unseparated and inseparable. This is brought to us peculiarly when as artists we face our own past as a people. There has come to us, and it has come especially through the man we are going to honor tonight, a realization of that past, of which for long years we have ashamed, for which we have apologized, we thought we wanted to hand down to our children. Suddenly, this same past is taking on form, color, and reality. And in half shame-faced way, we are beginning to be proud of it. We are remembering that the romance of the world did not die and lie forgotten in the Middle Age. That if you want romance to deal with, you must have it here and now and in your own hands. I once knew a man and woman that had 2 children, a daughter who was white, a daughter who was brown. The daughter who was white married a white man, and when her wedding was preparing, the daughter who was brown prepared to go and celebrate. But the mother said no, and the brown daughter went to her room and turned on the gas and died. Do you want Greek tragedy swifter than that? Or again, here's a little southern town, and you are in the public square. On one side of the square is the office of a colored lawyer, and on the other side are men who do not like colored lawyers. A white woman goes into the black man's office and points to the white field squares and says, I want $500 now, and if I do not get it, I'm going to scream. Have you heard the story of conquest of German East Africa? Listen to the untold tale. There are 40,000 black men and 4,000 white men who talk German. There were 20,000 black men and 12,000 white men who talked English. There were 10,000 black men and 400 men who talked French. In Africa then, where the mountains of the moon raised their white and snow-capped heads into the mouth of the tropic sun, where the Nile and Congo rise and the Great Lakes swim, these men fought. They struggled on mountain, hill, and valley and river, lake and swamp, until its masses, they sickened, crawled, and died, until the 4,000 white Germans had become mostly bleached bones, until nearly all the 12,000 white Englishmen had returned to South Africa, and the 400 Frenchmen to Belgium and heaven. All except a mere handful of the white men died. But thousands of black men from East, West, and South Africa, from Nigeria and the valley of the Nile, and from the West Indies still struggled, fought, and died. For 4 years, they fought and won and lost German East Africa. And all you hear about is that England and Belgium conquered German Africa for all the Allies. Such is true and stirring stuff on which romance is born, and from this stuff come the stirrings of men who are beginning to remember that this kind of material is theirs, and this vital life of their own kind is beckoning them on. The question comes next as to the interpretation of these new stirrings, of this new spirit, of what is the colored artist capable. We have had on the both part the colored and white people's singular unanimity of judgment in the past. Colored people have said, this work must be inferior because it comes from colored people. White people have said, it is inferior because it is done by colored people. But today there is coming to both realization, the work and the black man is not always inferior. Interesting stories come to us. A professor of the University of Chicago read to a class that had studied literature a passage of poetry and asked them to guess the author. They guessed a goodly company from Shelley and Robert Downing and Tennyson and Masefield. The author was Countee Cullen. Or again, the English critic John Drinkwater went down to a southern seminary, one of the sort which finishes young white women of the South. The students sat with their wooden faces while he tried to get some response out of them. Finally, he said, name me some of your southern poets. They hesitate. He said finally, I'll start out with your best, Paul Laurence Dunbar. With the growing recognition of Negro artists in spite of their severe handicaps, one comforting thing is occurring to both black and white. They are whispering, here is a way out. Here's the real solution of the color problem. The recognition accorded Cullen, Hughes, Fawcett, White, and others showed there is no real color line. keep quiet, don't complain, work, all will be well. I will not say that already this course amounts to a conspiracy. Perhaps I am naturally too suspicious. But I will say that there are today a surprising number of white people who are getting great satisfaction out of these younger Negro writers because they think it's going to stop agitation of the Negro question. They say, what is the use of your fighting and complaining? Do the great thing and the reward is there. And many colored people are all too eager to follow the advice, especially those who are weary of the eternal struggle along the color line, who are afraid to fight and to whom the money of philanthropists and the alluring publicity are subtle and deadly bribes. They say, what is the use of fighting? Why not show simply what we deserve and let the reward come to us? And it is right here as the NAACP comes upon the field, comes with this great call to a new battle, a new fight, and new things to fight before. The old things are wholly won, and to say that the beauty of truth and freedom which shall someday be our heritage and the heritage of all civilized men is not in our hands yet, that we ourselves must not fail to realize. There is New York tonight, a black woman molding clay by herself in a little bedroom, because there is not a single school of sculpture in New York where she is welcome. Surely there are doors she might burst through, but when God makes a sculpture, he does not always make the pushing sort of person who beats his way through doors, thrust in his face. This girl is working her hands off to get out of this country so that she can get some sort of training. There was Richard Brown. If he had been white, he would have been alive today instead of dead of neglect. Many people helped him when he asked, but he was not the kind of boy that always asks. He was simply one who made color sing. There is a colored woman in Chicago who is a great musician. She thought she would like to study Fontainebleau this summer, where Walter Damrosch and a score of leaders of art have an American School of Music. But the application blank of this school says, I am a white American and I apply for admission to this school. We can go to the stage. We can be just as funny as white Americans wish us to be. We can play all the sordid parts that America likes to assign to Negroes. But for anything else, there is still a small place for us. And so I might go on, but let me sum up this with suppose the only Negro who survived some centuries hence was a Negro painted by white Americans in the novels, essays they have written. What would people in 100 years say of black Americans? Now turn it around. Suppose you write a story and put it in the kind of people you know and like and imagine. You might get it published and you might not. And the might not is still far bigger than the might. The white publishers catering to white folk would say, it is not interesting to white folk. Naturally not. They want Uncle Toms, Topsies, good darkies, and clowns. I have in my office a story with all the earmarks of truth. A young man says that he started out to write and had his stories accepted. They began to write about the things he knew best about, that is, about his own people. He submitted a story to a magazine which said, we are sorry, but we cannot take it. I sat down and revised my story, changing the color of the characters and the locale, and sent it under the assumption names of a change of address, and it was accepted by the same magazine that refused it. The editor promising to take anything else I might send and providing it was good enough. We have, to be sure, a few recognized and successful Negro artists, but they are not all those fit to survive even on a good minority. There are but the remnants of that ability and genius among us whom the accidents of education and opportunity have raised the tidal waves of chance. We black folks are not altogether peculiar in this. After all, in the world at large, it's only the accident, the remnant, that gets the chance to make the most of itself. But if this is true of the white world, it is infinitely more true of colored world. It is not simply the great clear tenor of rolling haze that opened the ears of America. We have had many voices of all kinds as fine as his, and America was and is as deaf as she was for years to him. Then in a foreign land heard Hayes and put his imprint on him, and immediately America with all its imitative snobbery woke up. We approved Hayes because London, Paris, and Berlin approved him, and not simply because he was a great singer. Thus is the bounden duty of black America to begin this great work of the creation of beauty, of this preservation of beauty, of the realization of beauty, and we must use in this work all the methods that men have used before. And what have been the tools of artists in the times gone by? First of all, he has used the truth. not for the sake of truth, not as the science is seeking truth, but as one upon truth eternally thrust itself at the highest handmaid of imagination, as the one great vehicle of universal understanding. Again, artists have used goodness in all its aspects of justice, honor, and right, not for sake of an ethical sanction, but as the one true method of gaining sympathy and human interest. The apostle of beauty thus becomes the apostle of truth and right, not by choice, but by inner and outer compulsion. Free he is, but his freedom is ever bound by truth and justice, and slavery only dogs him when he is denied the right to tell the truth or recognize an ideal of justice. Thus all art is propaganda, and ever must be. Despite the wailing of the purists, I stand in utter shamelessness and say that whenever art I have for writing has been used always for propaganda, for gaining the right of black folk to love and enjoy, I do not care a damn for any art that is not used for propaganda, but I do care when propaganda is confined to one side while the other is stripped and silent. In New York, we have two plays, White Cargo and Congo. In White Cargo, there is a fallen woman. She is black. In Congo, the fallen woman is white. In White Cargo, the black woman goes down further and further, and in Congo, the white woman begins with degradation, but in the end, it's one of the angels of the Lord. You know the current magazine story. A young white woman goes down to Central America, and she is the most beautiful colored woman. And the most beautiful colored woman there falls in love with him. She crawls across the whole isthmus to get to him. The white man says nobly, no. He goes back to his white sweetheart in New York. In such cases, it is not positive propaganda of people who believe white blood divine, infallible, and holy, to which I object. It is the denial of a similar right of propaganda to those who believe black blood human, lovable, and inspired with new ideas for the world. While artists themselves suffer from its narrowing in their field, they cry for freedom in dealing with Negroes because they have so little freedom in dealing with whites. Du Bois Hayward writes porgy and writes beautifully of the black Charleston underworld. But why does he do this? Because he cannot do a similar thing for the white people of Charleston, or they would drum him out of town. The only chance he had to tell the truth of pitiful human degradation was to tell it of colored people. I should not be surprised if Octavius Roy Cohen had approached the Saturday Evening Post and asked permission to write about a different kind of colored folk than the monstrosities he has created. But if he has, the Post has replied, no, you're getting paid to write about the kind of colored people you are writing about. In other words, the white public today demands from its artists literary and pictorial, racial prejudgment which deliberately distorts the truth and justice. As for colored races are concerned, and it will pay for no other. On the other hand, the young and slowly growing black public still wants its profits, almost equally unfree. We are bound by all sorts of customs that have come down as secondhand soul cloths of white patrons. We are ashamed of sex, and we lower our eyes when people will talk of it. Our religion holds us in superstition. Our worst side has been shamelessly emphasized that we are denying we have or ever have had a worst side. In all sorts of ways, we are hemmed in, and our new young artists have to go fight their way to freedom. The ultimate judge has got to be you. You have got to build yourselves up into that white judgment, that calicity of temper, which is going to enable the artist to have as wide a chance for freedom. We can afford the truth. White folk today cannot. As is now, we are handing everything over to a white jury. If a colored man wants to publish a book, he has to go to a white publisher and a white newspaper to say it is great. And then you and I say so. We must come to the place where the work of art, when it appears, is reviewed and acclaimed by our own free and unfettered judgment. And we're going to have a real, invaluable, and eternal judgment only as we make ourselves free of mind, proud of body, and just of soul to all men. And then, do you know what will be said? It is already saying. Just as soon as true art emerges, just as soon as the black artist appears, someone touches the race of the shoulder and says, he did that because he was American, not because he was a Negro. He was born here. He was trained here. He is not a Negro. What is a Negro anyhow? He is just a human. It is the kind of thing you ought to expect. I do not doubt that the ultimate art coming from black folk is going to be just as beautiful, and beautiful largely in the same ways the art that comes from white folk, or yellow or red. But the point today is that until the art of the black folk compels recognition, they will not be rated as human. And when through art they compel recognition, then let the world discover it. What their art is, it is new, it is old as new. I had a classmate once who did 3 beautiful things and died. One of them was the story of a folk who did 3 beautiful things and died. One of them was the story of folk who found fire, and then went wandering in the gloom of night, seeking again the stars they had once known and lost. Suddenly, out of blackness, they looked up, and there loomed in the heavens. And what was it they said? They raised a mighty cry. It is the stars. It is the ancient stars. It is the young and everlasting stars. This was written in 1926. Guys, this is about W.e.b. Du Bois. Sorry, my head has been cut off. 1926, W.e. Du Bois, and that was, criteria for Negro Art. I've always loved this essay because it really talks about seeing ourselves beyond the racial stigma that's put on us and allowing our definition to be defined by what we create and not what the identity that is pushed upon us. I love it. I love it. I love it. Tell me what you love. And of course, comment, like, subscribe. I'll be back soon with another video.